Hey guys, this is Jack with Team Empire, and today I am doing another tier list video. This time I'm going to be doing a very similar thing that we did with set 6 and set 7, but I'll be going over the decks that will be available from sets that are included in the months of September through November. So basically set 9 format through set 10 format. And when I'm doing this, I'm going to split it up into the decks that are available in set 10, or set 9, excuse me, and I'll go over the ones that are in set 10, and just talk about them competitively, and the best and the worst decks within those, within that selected time period. Don't worry, we will be going over a set 11 one, along with a lyrical one, as soon as those sets are fully revealed, and I'll be sure to cover those too. But for right now, we're going to be covering the set 9 festival and all the decks we missed, along with set 10. And when I say all those decks, what I mean is I'm going to be covering the ones that got major support or ones that got the most relevant support. Because, for an example, something like, Mythiarch got a support card in... Where's Mythiarch? Here it is. Something like Mythiarch got support in like set 9, but it's a decent card, but it doesn't change Mythiarch's placement in the meta. I think for this to matter, it has to have cards that actually affect the deck itself. So, and also it just helps with all of this. Like, there's so many decks now, and I'm not going to go over all of them. I'm just going to be going over the most relevant support from the sets. Going into that, we're going to be talking about the deck. Before that, just, if you like this video, be sure to leave a like, comment if you have any thoughts about the tier list from this point onwards, and then, subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss that part 2 when December rolls around. And yeah, we'll just get into the list. First deck we have here is Sarda. I think it's pretty obvious we're going to be putting it in best deck category, even if it got hit technically twice, but we just caught it to JP's ban list, with the 1 Vilord and then the choice restriction of the overtrigger. It's still, it definitely helps against Bovs for a few niche reasons. Like, if they don't have a Vilord, it obviously makes your life a little bit easier. And then the overtrigger does help because DE's overtrigger is broken as shit, especially with the Vanguard with 2 crit. So yeah, it does help, but however, I feel like Bovs it's just so strong for other reasons rather than just, those 2 things. Like, it does everything. It has multi-attack, still has its triple drive consistently, still has its crit consistently. Some decks are starting to keep up with it, but it still is, in my opinion, and many other people's opinion, the best deck, and it probably won't change until there's some kind of even stronger deck introduced, or they introduce another hit. But yeah, not much to say here. If you've been playing this game up until throughout set 7 format, you will know this deck is still the best deck. Next up, we have a deck that I did not talk about, and that is Virgila. Virgila also goes in best decks. It's really strong. I mean, I played Virgila at Summerfest. It's a very good, Off Knights is just a very powerful grade 3. It basically is your main Vanguard, which kind of sucks because if you don't draw it or they get damaged or something, your game is basically over at that point. But there is a new factor to keep in mind with Virgila, is that it's kind of weird here in English because the 2 Skyride decks got delayed. We actually got Off Knights first, which is not supposed to happen, or at least we're not supposed to have such a big gap in between those 2. But now, the deck's just released, which means that Virgil is even stronger than when it was in Summerfest. So you have the new order that allows you to give your Azure when it stands a crit, so really nice for finishing power. And then you also have Flare costs more, which is a really good Combine Rusher restanding booster. So yeah, Virgil is just great. The only reason why it's below Bovs is because again, your whole strategy is reliant on seeing Off Knights. If you don't see Off Knights, you just don't have a game anymore. So that's why we're putting it right here next to Bovs as opposed to above Bovs. Because sometimes I feel like this deck is stronger. Another thing, keep in mind, is that when you're playing Virgila, your opponent's going to be playing they're playing against a Stride deck set, because Virgila is not that good going first unless you open a crazy rush turn. Other than that, it's the grade 3 turn is literally just 4 attacks with no additional drives, no additional crits, none of that. It's just a very middling deck. Now going into the new set 9 deck, we have Sabil, which I'm going to put in. See, mid feels harsh, but I want to let y'all know, like, mid, I guess, is more like average. In fact, I'm just going to put that right now. Like, mid has such a negative connotation in our, like, modern day, but, like, mid literally means, like, middle of the road. It's average, and that's where I'm going to put Sabil. It's definitely not non-competitive. Sabil is still a pretty damn good deck. You know, it does 5 attacks if your opponent's grade 3. It's a consistent Vanguard restander, which, I mean, those are always strong. And then it draws quite a few cards. I mean, the only problem with the draw power in this deck is it's very similar to, like, decks like Magnolia back in the day, or even still nowadays in some cases, where the plussing it gets, you have to drop a lot of cards for. So you're getting those cards back, but you're not really plussing. It's just kind of like a bunch of break evens. And that's what it feels like Sabil is. Because even though you can bounce a ton of cards back to your hand, unlike a lyrical deck, you don't really call that much from your deck. So it's like you can bounce 5 key shields back to your hand. And that's cool. And there's another deck that does draw a lot of cards, which we'll talk about in just a second, but it thins way more than Sabil does, which is why I think it's slightly stronger than Sabil. And that deck is Cod of Blaze. Cod of Blaze has been getting a ton of good support recently. In Festival Collection, it got a new double rare that allows you to look at top 5. Well, it's mainly for Zedlance and Cod of Blaze, which I'll talk about Zedlance when we get into the set 10 section. But for Cod of Blaze, you can just look at top 5 and then immediately put a card from them into Soul, which not only helps for your restanding of your rear guards, but it also can put your Vanguard into Soul, which means that you get even closer to the Divine Skill turn of Cod of Blaze. And then it got a new card, which I'll talk about for both these decks since they're shared, Enjun. Enjun, we've already talked about it. If you want to learn more about it, watch the deck test that JC and I did with Manurva versus Vermilion. But for Cod of Blaze, it's really strong too, because you can just shove any of your pieces that you're missing from your drop into your soul, so you can actually restand the rear guard that you want. And so Cod of Blaze, again, because of how much draw power it has and how much thinning it actually does in comparison to Sabil, I'm going to put it in playable. I'm going to put it in highly playable. It'll probably be at, like, near the bottom of highly playable, because this deck doesn't really have any removal besides the ace unit, which, I mean, every deck has an ace unit, but that's not really, like, that's not the deck itself. The deck itself does not have consistent removal, which these two do. Speaking of consistent removal, we have the Blood. So the Blood got the exact same support card as Cod of Blaze, which is why I'm even including it. And again, the reason why I'm including this one as opposed to other cards is because this is like very substantial support, and the Blood has something niche that I feel like is still valuable. It just still has some problems. The Blood has can attack multiple rear guards, and it binds, which is very relevant against stuff like Virgila and Sarda, especially Bov's now that it has one Vilord. I'm still going to put Vermilion probably below Sabil in terms of, you know, being in the mid category or average category, but because of Enjun enabling 4 attacks in the deck on turn 2, and just another multi-attack enabler, and the fact that against certain matchups, this can just bind all their important pieces, I think Vermilion is a deck that either, if you're considering a Dragon Empire deck, you might want to try it out, or if you're playing any of these decks right here, just keep in mind you could encounter the Blood. Moving out of the set 9 Dragon Empire stuff, we only have one for Dark States, at least one that's relevant to me, and that is Heart Luru. Heart Luru goes in best decks category, and I think it even goes slightly above Virgila. So here's the thing, Heart Luru is probably one of the best decks ever just introduced in a set, because it doesn't really have any promos yet, it uses barely any generics besides like Philia and maybe some Energy Cyclers and Rester. Other than that, it's entirely based on their archetype. I made a whole deck test video going over Heart Luru. Check that out if you're interested. Link in the description right here. Right here. It's very consistent. It can get the same board over and over again, and it's a good stuff deck. Kind of like Bob Sarga, which we're seeing a lot more. It's, I do one thing, or I do everything. Like, that one thing is I do everything. It restands 2 rear guards, gives them power, gives the front row power, +1 drive. One of their rear guards picks up a crit, one of their rear guards picks up a 2 to guard. It's remarkably like energy / CB efficient. yeah, it's just a really consistent, nice little engine, which I actually quite like because we could use more of that in standard. But like, this one deck just kind of has all of that in spades, and it might seem like I'm not going into too much like detail on it, but again, I have the deck test video for it. If you're interested, please go check it out. I think it's one of our better deck tests that we've done recently. Yeah, Heart Luru is just really good. Okay, now we have Daikaiser. I could be a lot harsher because Daikaiser. One thing, Daikaiser's cool. Before anyone comes after me, Daikaiser is a really cool deck. I'm glad that he reintroduces an old mechanic, that being Legion in the form of D-Legion, and a ton of the older support works with it, which I'm always a fan of because you're using Dayusha. However, there's a few things that really makes this deck, probably in my opinion, if I'm being generous, like mid and maybe even like towards the bottom of mid. I would say maybe a little, I don't know. The Blood still has more consistent removal and it draws more cards. The problem with Daikaiser to me is that it doesn't draw. Even if it has D-Legion, it just doesn't draw any cards. This deck can search the deck. It can thin the deck pretty consistently, along with, you know, it has more use for generics now because you can play less copies of your Dimensional Robos. But other than that, it just doesn't draw many cards. All of its cards are like break evens because even Dayusha with its draw, you have to put a card from your hand into soul anyways. So the deck itself just doesn't draw any cards. It hits pretty hard, especially for the Vanguard once you actually get into D-Legion. But if you don't have the hand to survive your opponent's next turn, especially like the decks up here that get consistent triple drive and Bashure gets a crit, then I don't know if you're going to be able to survive. Along with that, because D-Legion is tied to your opponent being grade 3, like the old Legion, you're basically like, your Vanguard basically doesn't do anything. Especially in a deck that has a superior rider, you're going to a Vanguard that doesn't really have anything going for it besides just one guard break, which is controllable by your opponent. So that's why I feel like Daikaiser needs to go in mid. And I could be a lot harsher. I know some people are saying that Daikaiser is just straight up bad. I think he's all right. I think with one or two more support cards in the future, Daikaiser could become a lot stronger. Now we have Manurva. I think this deck will be the last deck I put in the best deck. Here's the thing. It's either bottom of best deck or top of highly playable. I'm going to leave it at the top of best decks. Or bottom of best decks, definitely below Virgila. This deck is very similar to Virgila in a lot of ways, but it has advantages that Virgila sometimes doesn't. For one, Manurva actually retires herself when you ride into her, and she activates from Soul. So it's a lot easier to get Manurva back into your Soul and to re-ride into it, as opposed to Virgila, where once you use one, it's gone. It's gone forever. So far, there's no ways to get it back. On top of that, this deck does do a ton of attacks. It launches like average of 5, possibly 6 or 7 attacks once it gets into its grade 4. And again, once it gets to the grade 4, you have triple drive and then you have 1 drive. So it's already like, big power to the front row. Like I said, like a lot of these like do everything decks. Restands rear guards, calls rear guards during battle phase, gives power to the front row, and has a bunch of drive checks. The only thing is that, like Virgila, it also struggles immensely with going first. It can have a better turn 3 than Virgila, but that's only if you have a specific rear guard. So, because of factors like that, and also with the fact, like, kind of the Daikaiser argument, this deck also doesn't end with that many cards in hand. You have to invest a lot of cards from your hand for your aggro, and then once you have that, you have like an average of like 6 to 7, maybe 8 cards in your hand, which comparatively to a lot of these decks, again, makes it weaker. In fact, I'm going to do it. I'm going to put it in the top of highly playable, because I think it does struggle in a lot of regards. You're seeing it a lot more, but I just think it struggles in a few areas. But highly playable is still really good, especially at the top of highly playable right now. I mean, it's a really good deck. Next up, we have Platinum Ezel. I'm sorry. Not competitive doesn't mean it's like the shittiest deck. I probably put it in like top of not competitive. I might change my mind on it. Just let me know how you feel about it. The problem with Platinum is Ezel is supposed to be a rush deck. You can literally ride into your grade 3 Vanguard while your opponent's on grade 1. And it got a new card. In fact, you know what? Not even for Platina, the new double rare that Ezel got is actually pretty crazy. For those of you who don't know, when Ezel rides early, it gets -1 drive. But there's this new double rare that came out in set 9 that when it's placed, you counterblast 1, and you can either draw a card, or you could choose an Incandescent Lion Blonde Ezel and set its drive to 2. So the deck has very easy access to this card, and so you can basically just make your Vanguard a twin driving Vanguard while your opponent's on grade 1, potentially, which is like just insane. But like Daikaiser, it also suffers from certain problems. The one is that is Superior Rider deck, and with so many cards nowadays, even if you use them on turn 2, like grade 2s, say if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, activate all these effects. It turns on all of your opponent's late game skills earlier, which is a neat balancing mechanic, but because those cards are so strong, Platina could end up suffering, or Ezel could just end up suffering because those cards exist. On top of that, Platina feels weird because it's kind of designed to be slower in a rush deck. Both of Platina's primary skills get their full benefit once the opponent's on grade 3, which again defeats the purpose of even re-riding into it, especially since it doesn't count as Persona Ride. So again, I'm going to put Platina in the bottom of mid and average. I feel like Daikaiser in it are kind of in a similar spot because there are superior rider decks that can really benefit your opponent. It's just that Daikaiser can hit harder, while Ezel has to wait even longer for its full potential to come out. So I know I didn't put in not competitive, but I already have my pick for non-competitive. Nebula Knights goes here. Yeah, Nebula Knights is not that good, or at least not competitive, I wouldn't say, because Nebula Knights, they have a really good grade 2 turn, but the Vanguard itself is so middling. It feels very Jewel Knight inspired, but with none of like the benefits of Jewel Knights, where they can chain into multiple different attacks throughout the battle phase by calling over their own units. Nebula Knights are like, oh, we do that only during the main phase, and we only do 4 attacks, and the actual like big payoff is you can look at X amount of cards equal to the number of your Nebula Knights, but it's only on Persona Ride turns, and you don't even get to put those cards on the bottom. So let's say you have 5 Nebula Knights, look at top 5 cards of your deck, and they're all blanks, they're all normal units. You can't manipulate any of those to the bottom, so you just have to keep those on top and know for like these next, it doesn't even get any extra drives. So you just know for these next 3 damage checks, they're just going to be all blanks. So to me, the payoff just doesn't feel worth it for Nebula Knights. Maybe if you could put them on the bottom, this deck would be far greater, or it gets like a rear guard or something that can pick up a drive check, which I'm kind of surprised it doesn't have. Yeah, as of right now, Nebula Knights have a really good turn 2, but when it gets to grade 3, it plateaus super quickly. King of Knights Alfred. So some people will actually be kind of surprised with me about this. I'm gonna put it in playable. I'm gonna put this deck in playable. It's not the best deck in the world. It might even be on the lower end of highly playable, but Alfred does some really good stuff. Actually, you know what? No, I am going to change my mind on this, and the only reason why I'm going to put it in mid, the only reason why I'm putting it in mid is because we don't have access to Zero. We don't have access to the promo that it has, which means it loses out on a ton of its like end game potential, a ton of its like win condition, because for those of you who don't know, Zero is like not only a generic to where like when it's grade 2, it says when it's placed you can counterblast 1, draw a card, and then also gets 10k on attack if your opponent's grade 3 or greater, so it's like a T-fault in that sense. But it also, if you have a Royal Paladin Vanguard, you can EB3 instead to draw a card, and then when it stands by your Royal Paladin Vanguard's effect, and if you Persona Road this turn, your opponent's auto abilities cannot activate for the battle it attacks. So not only does it stop PGs, but it also stops Blitz orders, which is just really strong. I mean, this, like, that makes, like, there's a reason why Alfred topped in some team tourneys in JP is because of its own support and its promo. As of right now, we have no idea if we're even going to get that promo. So because of that, Alfred goes here, even though Alfred himself isn't too bad. A station, whatever people call it. This is a this is a highly playable deck. I will put it right here at highly playable. I feel very confident in that regard. Because the Sashion, it's so combo heavy and so consistent, and it's like the ride line is great because it immediately sets up your blast token, while also on that same turn grabbing your order, which can accelerate your plays even further. And Sashion himself, the way I describe this deck to people who don't know what it is it's pretty much Stoicheia Eva. It's a very consistent deck that can net you consistent advantage while also allowing, well, even potentially even being better than Eva in some regards, since it has its own version of the crest. It gives plus 5k to your front row for every 3 of your blast gauges or plant gauges. So yeah, it's just really consistent deck. The only problem with it is that some of these decks just edge it out in terms of like more that they can do. You know, all of these decks get extra drive checks. Bob's gets extra drives with extra crits, and then these decks do more attacks, or on average do more attacks, because Sashion can do 5 attacks. It's just it only does that when the opponent's on like high damage. But these do 5 attacks regardless, and there are certain cards that people can play in certain matchups where Sashion basically acts like a wet blanket. It's not included on this list, but we have a deck like Sacrifice Glass, which can just turn off your blast token's protection and then retire it. Dragon Empire decks can play this order from Overdress Set 2 that says your units can attack your opponent's back row units, which means if they play that and they start swinging all their attacks as your blast token, you have to guard it like your opponent, like you're at 6 damage, like you're at 5 damage, because like if you don't and your blast token gets retired, it's over. Like you cannot win at that point. And especially, again, the blood coming up again, the blood can just consistently attack the blast token. And again, if that blast token dies, you do not have a game anymore. So Sashion actually has like a very clear weakness that if a deck can exploit that weakness, it's over. Like there's nothing that they can do. Next up we have a love of mine, Belgar the Sky Ruler. But unfortunately for me, again, I have to be non-biased, it goes in not competitive. It goes above Nebula Knights though. The reason why is very simply, this deck is just all about aggro. It's all about rush, doesn't care about keeping a hand at all. It is very clearly like, we do this one thing, we do it well, or if our rabbits go to damage, we lose. And even then, if you get the full rush, you don't have many cards in your hand, so even then you still might lose. The deck doesn't really have like a guaranteed win condition. It's just go hard as hell, call all your rabbits, and hope to God that your opponent doesn't see defensives, and you push them far enough to where you can actually just potentially kill them by your turn 3. There are ways to make the deck more defensive, which I have tried to make a balance using stuff like the Vixen. A commenter actually left that on there, which I really appreciate, along with like playing more copies of Persona Ride, and that does help. But the problem is, again, the problem still stands. So unless Bashure wants to fix those problems, I don't see this deck ever really changing from, like, definitely not going to fucking highly playable or best deck unless it gets, like, cards that give it a crit or something, like they introduce their own nectar for it. But yeah, Belgar is just very piece reliant. That's the best way I can put it. Very piece reliant, and even if it sees all its pieces, it's not like a Lithic Dilemma where you can just win the game. Okay, so that's the set 9 section. To everyone who skipped to the set 10 section, welcome. Thanks for being here. We're going to talk about the next deck all throughout the set 10 support. We have first deck, which is Bashure. This is the new Dragon Empire ride line that's very Tachikaze inspired, and this is going to go in mid. I think it's going to go above Daikaiser, actually. I actually quite like this deck for a few reasons. For one, even though the ride line seems bad, it actually has really good applications. If you play Shura in this deck, the Varga card, which you probably want to, because this deck's all about retiring its own rear guards, and it calls cards from the deck using cards like Latifa, so you can then call Shura, and then bounce any cards called by your ride line, or any cards that you called off of Bashure's top 5, or Latifa's top 5. On top of that, one thing I love about Bashure that really helps him as opposed to some of these other filler ride lines, his on-attack skill, his main skill, is not tied to anything. It's not tied to soul, it's not tied to energy, it's not tied to CB, so it's very hard for your opponent to play around it, practically impossible. Like, it's more reliant on you having rear guards, which with Vinashure's first skill, and the amount of cards that can bounce shit back to your hand is very easy to do. Now, it sounds like I'm really glazing this deck, and I'm just pointing out all the positives because now we're going to get to the negatives. The negatives is that because you have to drop cards from your hand in some instance, it's like the Greedon situation where you're playing with less cards, like you have a phantom hand. You have less cards in your hand that appears to your opponent. Like you could have like 8 cards in your hand, but you need to call 3 of those rear guards back. So basically you have a 5-card hand. And on top of that, again, it doesn't really have like a solid win condition. It's kind of just like do the thing consistently, make your opponent 3 to guard, triple drive, hope to see some crits, and hope to win the game. Yeah, but other than that, like Vinashure, like it's not bad. I can definitely see this deck getting better and better over time if they just give it more consistent support. But it's really good. I think it's one of the better out of the new Rylines introduced in the set. Next up, we have Zedlance. Zedlance got 2 new support cards. One of them is a set order searcher that's actually generic. Probably see play eventually if we get new Dragon Empire Rylines that rely on set orders. But the other card's really good. It's a Combine Rusher for EB3 when your Vanguard is chosen by your order effect. And then when this unit's chosen by the order effect, you can then give your Vanguard 5k. So it allows you to bump up your Vanguard, which is really important because Zedlance is a Vanguard restander that can pick up triple drive and then pick up 1 drive off of the new Cod of Blaze and Zedlance order. Double rare, the unit guy from Festival Collection. So he's still not like great, he's still not amazing. I would probably put him again in like mid or average. He's not really topping, but he could do really well. Oh, we have a big one. This is Dje Magnus. I'm going to be here for a while, and the only reason why is because Magnus is a good upgrade, but not better than Ignis. And there's a few reasons for that. It's really good as a replacement for your grade 3, because he sets the opponent's power to 0. And this is really good, especially when you're going first. Because, again, if your opponent's Vanguard's power used to be 1, which meant that, like, if you swung with, like, a 15k rear guard, and your opponent's at 1 power, you can then just, drop a 15k shield, and now you're 15,001. Now that it sets to 0, they have to drop more cards from their hand, which is even better because of his other skill that bumps up the front row by 5k. So, yeah, like Dje, those 2 things already make Dje a much better upgraded version than the regular Dje that was introduced in set 7 of Overdress. Now we'll get to the weirdest part. The crit is still reliant on the opponent being grade 3, which I think is probably fair, but the weirdest part is his next skill that requires like you to target a demonic jewel dragon. It only works on the jewels, and it only works on basically the specific triple rare that it got, Geogirl. And again, most of Dje's best support is reliant on the grade 4. And in most cases, you're going to ride into the grade 4 as opposed to Persona riding into Magnus, because Ignis just does more for a lot less. So tying a skill like that to not only being the opponent being grade 3, but also have to choose a specific rear guard, while also being a Persona ride reliant effect or a limit break tied effect, just adds way too many like conditions all at once for it to be a strict upgrade over Ignis. And I do think this deck is going to get more support in set 11, but as it stands right now, it doesn't really change Dje's overall spot in the meta, at least not to me. It places it, I'm going to place it, because it hasn't really topped very much, I'm going to place it in the top of average, top of mid, top of average. I think that's fair because of just the fact that Magnus does help, but he doesn't help enough. And with all the other support still being included and no way to actually find your grade 4, there's no in-archetype way of searching Dje besides the Draco Kid, which isn't even played, I would still say Dje has a lot of the same issues that it normally has. Next up is Blangmire. I didn't talk about Blangmire Nexus like at all. Yeah, Nexus used to be right up there, or right next to Bov's before like Virgila and Luru came in. But he's still competitive. He's still very competitive. I'll put him like even above like a Sashion, like right here. He got a new card in set 10. It's like this clown. I think it's played in a few lists. It's basically just like the Colossus, except when it binds itself face down, it gives something 5k, and then if you have 4 more cards in your face down in your bind zone, it gives something 10k. So it powers up your rear guards more, which does help on Divine Skill turn, especially. But yeah, other than that, deck hasn't really changed at all, besides like the inclusion of Filia. If you want like a really good guide on like Blangmire, Lupe actually made a great deck profile over our BSF top, so link in the description right here. Go check that out. But yeah, he's still a pretty good deck. Next up we have Odium. Odium kind of triple rare in this set, and it's actually really good. Basically just takes like 2 or 3 cards that she got in previous sets and just shoves them into one card, which I know some people don't like, but I actually quite like it. Like, why have more cards when you can have one card that does more things? Odium, it's like an Energy Blast 3 for top 7 check for any grade 3 card. So it's really good in that case because like you can not only search your Banes, you can search your Persona Rides, you can also search your Anachronous Dragons. But other than that, still, and also it's a counter charger if you have 4 or more gauge, which is like just really strong. It doesn't change the deck too much in the meta because it's like it's still exactly where it is and it's still kind of a slower deck. But I'm gonna put it in highly playable. I'm gonna put it right next to Cod of Blaze. From one Liel to another, we have Draanis. This is Liel Amorta's new form, and it's good. I want to say it's like pretty damn good. The only things that really changes though is that it just minuscule upgrades besides the fact that it gets +1 drive. But those little things do add up. Like obviously +1 drive is good, especially going first. On top of that, because its first skill binds a rearguard and the second skill binds a rearguard, you can now use your copies of Liel Amorta as a PG much earlier. So this deck is very hard to kill. It basically plays like 7 to 8 PGs. On top of that, the Divine Skill is a minor upgrade. And yeah, the fact that you can call any card from your bind zone now as opposed to just any card that shares the name with a card in your bind zone instead of just the card you bind makes this card really good. The only problem is that like it feels like Draanis is like the only really good card out of all the new cards, because her actual triple rare she got is like, it's alright, it's not the best though. I feel like we've gotten better ones. All it does is just energy charge 1 early, and then it also gives your rearguards 5k, but only if the opponent's Vanguard's grade 3. So like the fact that it doesn't even give the Vanguard power is like kind of strange. And the fact also is that for this deck's like big kill turn with like Gabuilius and stuff, it has to have like 3 CB, which is very controllable by your opponent. So besides those factors, it still is a very good deck, especially going first. I'll put this deck above a Sashion. I'll put it right here. And again, the fact that it has more PGs, I actually will put it actually above Blangmire. Because it has access to those Amorta PGs that you no longer have to like keep in your hand for Persona Rides, it's very easy for Draanis to actually survive a Blangmire turn. Next up is Resile. He got a double rare, which I think is actually a decent double rare, but as opposed to where it is right now, it's like mid average. The new double rare just gets like, you know, extra power if it's called by Resile. The most important part is that it's like 15k early and a 15k interceptor early, which is pretty good. Other than that, it's like, you know, it's fine. I may even put it above your Jewel just because it does have guard restrict. I'm actually gonna put it above your Jewel. But yeah, not much to say about Resile. I felt like including it because the new double rare is good, and the fact that like it does utilize a lot of the new generics from set 9, like Dissection Angel. So Bastion and Alden got a new triple rare in the form of Ezel, I think that's her name. Ezel. Her skill is like she's basically a new Alden. She counterblasts 1 instead of counterblast 2, and soul blasts 1 to call a grade 3 from your hand, or call a card from your hand. And if you call it a grade 3, you can then draw 2 cards. Then it also gets intercept, 5k power and 5k shield if you have a Bastion or Alden Vanguard. That's the only really substantial upgrade Alden got. But with that, Alden has a really good Divine Skill turn 3, because if you call that, then use its skill to call Rationale, you draw 2 cards. Use Rationale's skill, Energy Blast 4, draw a card. Divine Skill, bounce both those back to your hand, and if you manage to find another Ezel off of that Divine Skill, call it, Counterblast, Soul Blast, call the Razionale, draw 2, Razionale skill, Energy Blast 4, draw 1. So it can like have a massive swing and advantage. Other than that though, it's like the deck's still kind of where it is. Like it got like a really good promo card. I'm probably gonna put it even like below Vanashior. I might just put it in mid right here. Bastion got a few more cards. They got a really good double rare that basically like early game can like check top 5 to search for any grade 3 card except like Regalis pieces and put it into hand. So the fact that it's a grade 2 that becomes a grade 3 and it gives Bastion a little bit of early game with also searching power, along with the new copy of just basically Alden, new Alden, being way cheaper than the old one. I'm gonna put him also right here next to Alden. I might even just put it above like Vanashior. Maybe not above Blood. Maybe above Blood, just because it can do extra drive checks and stuff. It's not too bad. Also, it did get a card that can really mess up a Sashion, because they got a new grade 3 that Energy Blast 3, and when it attacks the entire column. So not only could you just be like, oh, I'm going to swing at your Vanguard, I'm also going to swing at that Blast token. And then off Alden, you can, off Bastion, you can restand that rear guard, and then swing at that column again. So yeah, because of that, like little inclusion, Bastion also gets a bit of like, removal, which Bastion got some really good support in set 10. I'm surprised I didn't include it. My apologies. We are still trucking along. We have Vaser. Vaser is probably one of the best comeback stories in modern Vanguard, at least right now, because this deck was, if I were to put it right there, like I remember in set 7 I put it in like C tier, which is like the equivalent of either mid or like non-competitive. Nowadays I'm putting this in highly playable. I'm putting this above Liel. Not above a Manurva though. Maybe Liel and Vaser are around the same spot, but Vaser got only 2 cards, but it shows that like quality over quantity is what we need more of in the game, because Vaser got 2 cards and they're both insane. Got a new order that fixes all of the problems of its previous orders. It basically is like a less powerful version of his first order, Elif Glumani, but it's free and it can be played from the drop zone, which is crazy. That's insane. On top of that, we got a new Mythics, the third Mythics, which is not only grade 1, so you can play straight from turn 1. It can also check top 5 for Persona Ride or normal orders, which are the 2 things that Vaser actually couldn't search. So now you have a searchable card that can search more of your cards that can't be searched. So that's also insane, and it's also a bubble mine. So like, yeah, it's just really good. The deck was already like had really good stuff. The problem is all of that was overcosted, and again, it had certain pieces that it couldn't search out of deck, despite the fact that it can search so many cards every single turn. Makes the deck far more consistent. Makes the deck very easy to hit triggers, hit double crit, hit OT for game. Deck can already do 5 attacks using its second Mythics. What's his name? Oh god, Garzorms. Yeah, so this is a really, really good deck. I mean, super powerful now. Didn't even need a new grade 3. It just needed those 2 new cards, and it instantly makes the deck one of the best decks, or one of the best picks if you don't want to take one of the best 3 decks. Impalio. So Impalio got a new triple rare, and this is actually a restander. Impalio finally got a restander, and because of that, it's going right here. Impalio is still a fine pick. The only problem with it is that it's just, it just reaches, once it reaches its ceiling, it's kind of hard for the deck to just continue that momentum. And sometimes it just takes a while for the deck to get to those unguardable numbers. Decks are just a lot faster than it, so it could just kill them before it even gets to that point. And the new triple rare, while it is really good for being a GG while also being a restander, it has its own problems as a restander in Impalio. Part of the strengths of Impalio is that if your opponent's at 4, it's a very precarious situation because they swing with the Vanguard, and then you don't want to no guard that because they could just check a crit and then win the game. So you guard that, but then they have a rear guard that has Twin Drive as well. They have Vinster, which creates the exact same situation, but it's actually worse because if they didn't hit any triggers, there's even more of a likelihood for them to hit a crit on Vinster. And then if they do hit a crit on Vinster, put it on the other rear guard that hasn't attacked yet, and all of a sudden it's a very very hard number to guard with extra crits. But now with this Resander, since you have to attack with this one first, you swing with it, your opponent could just be like, okay, no guard, hit a defensive, the rest of the turn is much easier to guard. So while the Resander is good, it's only really good when your opponent's at 5 damage, which isn't really likely to happen a lot of time in Impalio. However, Impalio is still like a really good like sleeper pick. I actually really like Impalio. Okay, we're going to go over the 2 decks that actually are benefited by the new generic in Brant Gate for set 10. This is basically just T-Fault in Brant, and it also gets extra benefits for having a monster Vanguard, mostly just more power. Aled Dilemma, while it still sees some play, I am glad to say that this deck is just kind of... It feels wrong to put it in highly playable. I'm going to put it... I'm going to put it at the bottom of highly playable, okay? Because if it does see its copies of, what's his name? Of Moe Flash, or one copy of Moe Flash, it can just do a lot of the same things. The problem is, I think, for the deck is, or not a problem, it's a good thing, but a lot of people are just a lot more aware of this deck now, and they know how to play against it, and they know how to like guard against it. So it's really reliant, it's especially reliant nowadays on them hitting triggers, especially like their over trigger, in order to try and win the game. So that's why I put Aled Dilemma here. The new card does help a lot in that regard, because, you know, just set an order and then instantly you can just try and find Moe Flash even faster. However, I think the new triple rare helps Eva the most. Eva already was just like a deck that refused to die, and this is even more so. Like, Eva just refuses to go away, and this new triple rare does help it become a highly playable deck. Just the rush goes crazy. The fact that it has access to 2 combine rushers now, because it does play the generic from set 9, and the fact that it has it can top 5 check off its order into the new monster, the new magnet monster triple rare, and then that monster, since you play in order, you can then Soul Blast, check another top 5, and then call one of the Obskadids to either retire the opponent's front row or get a crit. And Eva, by its own nature, has so many other tools. It's a remarkably consistent deck, and it got even more consistency with the new triple rare. So Eva is just like still a really good deck. I put it right up there with the Sashion. Some cases it might be better, some cases it might be worse. They're both around the same level to me. Almost done. New set 10 ride line, we have Nonic. This is like the epitome of mid. It goes right above Daikaiser. Yeah, it's like this deck, it does a lot of things, but unlike these decks up here that do a lot of things, and a lot of those things are really strong, this one doesn't have like any other things that it does. It's not really like that special of a gimmick. It just gets triple drive and just restands a rear guard and then gives a rear guard a crit. And that's all it does. It doesn't have any additional benefits when the opponent's going like on grade 3 or anything. It just does that over and over again, and it can just burn itself out remarkably quickly because the deck actually doesn't draw that many cards either. It's a fine deck, I would say. It's not like the worst deck in the world, and I would say it's going to get better, but based on how set 11's going in terms of reveals, I don't know about that. This feels like a very good starter like deck. It feels like a really good deck if you're like getting someone into Vanguard, because all of the cards you need are in that set. And it's just very simple to learn, which I like. I mean, it's good to have decks to teach people how to play, but in terms of like, you know, kind of a hype new ride line, it doesn't do as much as you would expect it to do. Okay, we have the joke of set 10 now. We have Granfia. This is like the epitome of non-competitive. I don't know what the fuck they were thinking with this ride line, with this new upgrade. It got a new form in set 10, but Granfia, being a super aggro deck, kind of like Belgar, they gave it a Persona Ride like reliant new form that upgrades the plant token or the Nobilis Rose, which you would think would be really good, but no. The new Nobilis Rose, all it does is just act as a really fat shield once. So for an aggro deck, you now have a turn 4 play that all it does is give you one instance of a fat shield. That's it. Yeah, so Grand Field was already unplayable at this point in the meta, but now it's just kind of like had the final nail in the coffin that like, yeah, they don't really care. I guess they did it as like a mandate or something. Yeah, it's not good. Argo Sirens. I am going to put Argo Sirens right here in average. And the reason why is because I've ranked these decks very highly. I feel like they're right here with these two decks because Argo Sirens, they did start off as like non-competitive or really below in average. Now they got 2 new cards, and both these cards are very crazy. You got a new Tier Dragon that allows it to basically act as a Yugma Shot. You can EB3, discard an order, draw 2 cards, and then if your opponent's Vanguard's grade 3, it gets 5k. And then every time it attacks and every time it stands, it picks up 5k. So basically it's 15k for the whole turn when you stand it off Calliopeia. And then it got a new card that allows you to, upon discard, either reduce your EB cost or reduce your CB cost. So it helps a ton in terms of Calliopeia's versatility. So yeah, Calliopeia, a deck I absolutely love, and I think it still can be really good. It's just super reliant on seeing triggers, which I know it's a lot of decks, but some of these decks can hit triggers much faster based on how much thinning they have. And Argo Sirens, while it does thin, doesn't thin as fast. Almost done. We have the new Lyrical Ride lines. Juicy Fruity. This goes in not playable, not competitive. I think this deck is bad. Now you're probably thinking, well, that's a little harsh, Jack. No, I tested this deck. I think Venascior is far better and a lot more fun. The good news about Venascior is that it gets drive regardless of the opponent's grade. Juicy Fruity does not do that. Venascior has basically a CB1 for 4 attacks because of its archetypal triple rare. This also has CB1 for 4 attacks. Again, it doesn't get triple drive for some reason unless the opponent's on grade 3. And the main thing that this deck struggles with that Venascior didn't was that this is an overcosted deck. Its main thing to generate plant tokens is Soul Blast 1, but it also is reliant on having extra copies of itself in Soul to give your plant tokens 5k. You see the problem with that there? And they also, its main skill is CB1, and unless you have a booster behind it, that plant token is not hitting anything. And while it seems like it does a lot, like, you know, if it bounces back to your hand, you can draw a card replacing the plant token that you just called. But also, like, oh wow, it gains all the trigger effects of your Vanguard. But if your opponent just PGs the Vanguard, that doesn't do anything. You can just give the power and the crits to the plant token anyways. On top of that, this deck has no form of thinning at all. It has no form of thinning. And it's reliant on other cards to plus, because you have to bounce plant tokens back to your hand. It just does a lot. What I'm saying is that this deck does a lot, but it doesn't do any of those things super well. I know it gets, we've seen its set 11 support, and set 11 support is actually really good. So I will, like, once I get there, I'll bump this deck up. But as opposed to right now, I think there's tons of other decks, tons of other lyrical decks too, that do what this deck does, but way better. Speaking of that, we have Foria. Foria goes here. Foria got a really good triple rare, really good like grade 1 triple rare that like on turn, like as early as you have CB, you can just call that card down, counterblast 1, top 5 call for anything, or if it's a friend, you can add it to your hand. So it searches Persona Ride, searches Melties, searches all of your like friend specific like archetype cards. On top of that, any friends in the same column as this, as long as you have 5 or more friends, that unit and this unit get power plus 5, which is really good because in Foria's case, you can have that new triple rare behind Foria, and now Foria is an 18k base, which means that they don't have any like archetypes or ride lines that can remove it, like Heart Luru against Phase Ruger, against Draanis, against Sashion, Eva, like decks that actually can't remove it. You're just gonna be an 18k base all game. So yeah, and Foria already is like a triple driving Vanguard that can restand. So yeah, Foria got really good support in this set, despite the fact that it's really only one card. But again, quality over quantity. Next up, we have Artsaria. Artsaria got a didn't get a triple rare, but it did get 2 new cards. But one of them being from Juicy Fruity, it did get access to a counter charger. Not that it really needed one, but it's nice to have the option. And while also getting a really good double rare in the form of, I forgot her name, but she's like grade 2 on place. You check top 7 and you can mill a sound system card, which is obviously really strong because like you need those sound systems in your drop for Artsaria, and plus you do play a lot of them, so you need to find a way to get them out of your deck. So calling this over and over again, especially after bouncing it, can really help. On top of that, when it's called over, or when it's just retired, not even when it's called over, when it's retired during either player's turn, you can call a Shadow Army token to your back or rearguard circle. So it's very similar to cards that like Orphist has gotten recently. Allows you to have a much better like 4 attack turn, because you can just call a 15k token over that card, and then that card calls a 15k token behind that, making it a 30k attack. Or if you're like turn 4 onwards, you can just start calling like multiple, you can start calling a bunch of different like tokens, spread them way faster to have way bigger numbers. So yeah, Artsaria, it was already a really good deck. I'm going to put this in, again, average, since it actually can shut down Argo Sirens. I'm going to put this, it actually can shut down Virgila too. I'm going to put it right here next to Resile. Lucia Fail. Lucia Fail got a new double rare that is, when it's called, you can put a grade 2 or less card from your drop into your soul, or I think it's just any card. You put a card from your drop into soul, and then she gets 5k. Then when she's shoved into soul by your Vanguard's ability, you can choose one of your back or rear guards and stand it. That's really good because she does have a rear guard that when it boosts, you can soul blast 2 to give it 10k. So being able to restand your Albelina along with that booster makes for a fat attack. On top, but other than that, it didn't really change too much. I'm just gonna put it in, like, once again in a average tier. I'm gonna put it right here, above here, because like these other decks are gonna be at 18k base. But unlike Foria, it actually doesn't. Actually, I'm gonna put it above Foria. Unlike Foria, it doesn't actually need a rear guard on board to perform that. It just needs to activate its divine skill once. So yeah, that's it. I know this is a long video. Again, if you just want to see the set 10 section, I'm going to put a little time card in there, or if you just want to see the current section, which is up to like right now when set 9's released, I'll put a timestamp for there. But thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know if you enjoyed the video, if you have any like discussions about like where I put certain placements. Please let me know. I'm always willing to discuss with the community, especially regarding like the format and regarding all these new decks and new supports. Again, be sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more content like this. Keep an eye out in a few months for that set 11 and Lyrical 1. I'm really looking forward to making that. Anyway guys, take care, bye.